Hi guys, welcome and who dat? I'm Joe, and we're here in Saints Nation at the bye week, and this is the opportunity for us Saints reactors to give out some awards, right? Well, I'm going to give my awards out like everybody else, but first, what I want to do is I've taken the stats that our offensive players are at for right now, and I've projected on this same course where these players are going to finish. And I had some numbers written at the beginning of the season for these players, what I expected they would do. And we're going to compare the numbers. And after looking at that, final season stats for our offense, then we'll get into the awards. So right now the Saints are 5-5. We are sitting on top of our NFC South division. It's been a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of season for the Saints. We've experienced some highs, experienced some lows. And I think what we've all come down to is this team is average. They have the ability to play very well, and they have the ability to play very poorly. So there's some disappointments. Matter of fact, the award for biggest disappointment should go to the entire team, including the coaching staff. But hey, big picture, we're 5-5 and we're still on top of our division. Our entire season is ahead of us. It's just like starting fresh, except we have an advantage. We have a lead in the division, and we can make the playoffs and host a playoff game as a divisional winner if we just take care of business in the 7 games that remain. I think if the Saints are going to do that, they're going to have to perform better than they've been performing for sure. But if they stay the course, I project they'll finish 8-9, maybe 9-8. That still might be good enough to win this division. I thought at the beginning of the season we would finish 10-7, and I thought that would be comfortable. We would have at least a game lead on the next team in the division. So right now, these numbers I'm going to show you, these projected final stats, they're going to have to be a little better if this team plans on winning this division. Well, we're in a decent position now. My cats are all over the place today. I got Riley bit right here by my feet. He's my angel. This is my boy right here. This is my bit. He loves to get on my shoulder. He loves to sit on my shoulder. This is how much he loves me. He's such a big boy. Okay, here we go. Let's start with the Dennis Allen Derek Carr Project 2.0. Dennis Allen's pet project, Derek Carr. So if he keeps up this pace and plays the last 7 games, Carr will finish 374 out of 568. He'll finish with 3,792 yards, 17 touchdowns, but only 7 interceptions. I had projected Carr would go 335 out of 500 for 4,200 yards, 35 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. I thought this was going to be a big passing touchdown year for Carr. The biggest surprise to me here is the lack of yards per attempt. He's had 2 or 3 games over 300 yards, but his yards per completion and yards per attempt have been bad, the whole team, for years. But the touchdowns, I mean, my goodness. He's got 10 touchdowns through 10 games. So That's awful. I would expect that from Taysom Hill if he was our starting quarterback. I mean, I would at least, and then he'd have a bunch of rushing touchdowns on top of that. So that's disappointing. But the number of interceptions, he's only thrown 4 through 10 games. That's kind of a surprise. And his completion percentage right now is 65.9%. I projected he would be 65%. So he's almost at 66. So that's kind of a surprise. I thought 65% was being a little, positive. But so that's how I'm going to do this. The player name and in bold what they are projected to do if they keep the course. And then below what I projected would come out of the player. Riley's on the table right now, so the camera's shaking a little. He's very curious. So let's pull up AK, Alvin Kamara, running back. He missed the first 3 games. Right now, he's averaging 3.8, around 3.8 yards a carry. So he's projecting to finish with 208 carries for 776 yards and 4 touchdowns. I thought after missing the first 3 games through 14 games, he would have 210 carries for 951 yards and 8 touchdowns. My projection was that he would average about 4.53 a carry. So he's averaging way less than that. And but as far as carries go, there are games where he has too many and there's games where he doesn't have enough. And that's kind of balancing out to kind of what I thought he should get, 15 carries a game. So he's projected to get 4 total rushing touchdowns. So let's see if he can find the end zone here more than he has been. We weren't using him in the red zone a lot. I think that's going to change here. If this coaching staff has any ability to coach at all, they'll realize your best players here, AK and Taysom Hill. So I'm going to pull up quarterback Taysom Hill, but we're going to focus on the rushing numbers. Yeah, and there's a big discrepancy here. If he keeps at this clip, he's going to finish with 85 carries for 443 yards and 5 touchdowns. But I expected Taysom to get 7 to 10 carries a game. So my projection had Taysom Hill having 153 carries for 765 yards and 6 touchdowns. So as far as touchdowns go, he's right around on pace, but he's barely getting over half of the amount of carries he should be getting, over the average of the first 10 games. And I projected that he would average about 5 yards a carry. I think right now, technically, he is averaging between 5 and 6 yards a carry for the season. So, the biggest disappointment here is the number of carries that he's had. I mean, he's projected to get 85 if he keeps up this pace. So, hopefully, when it's all said and done, he has at least 100 carries on the season. All right, let's pull up some wide receivers, and we're going to start with Michael Thomas. I projected that he would get 60 catches for 840 yards and 7 touchdowns. But if he plays the last 7 games, he's on pace for 66 catches for 761 yards and 2 touchdowns. So the biggest difference here is the number of touchdowns. Thomas is performing right around where I thought he would, except I figured he'd have more touchdowns. He is injured with that knee, and we're not going to know anything definitive until next week. So whether he's able to play in the last 7 games or not, how many of those games he'll play, we'll see. Wide receiver Chris Olave, I projected he would finish with 70 catches for 1,120 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's on pace for 95 catches for 1,116 yards and 5 touchdowns. So I was pretty spot on here on the yardage and tight end and touchdowns. Just he's going to finish with a heck of a lot more catches. If he gets involved, there's been a couple of games where he was non-existent, and then a couple of games where he did really well. So that's your sophomore slump right there. Not too bad. Rashid Shaheed, if he maintains this pace, he'll have 53 catches for 893 yards and 5 touchdowns. I thought he would get about 34 catches for big yardage, 630, and 3 touchdowns. So he's finding the end zone on average more than I thought he would. But he has that huge yards per catch. And if he maintains this pace, he will have 53 catches. That's a lot. That's more than I thought he would get. Speaking of more than I thought they would get, Alvin Kamara at running back. He's on pace for 85 catches for 519 yards and only 2 touchdowns. I figured he'd have about 58 catches on the year, but I figured he'd have about 580 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air. So it looks like he's going to catch a heck of a lot more balls. That happens when you catch 13 in one game and 10 in one game, but you're only averaging 3 or 4 yards a catch. I expected a lot more per catch. Well, I don't have Taysom Hill's numbers presented up here. I figured he would only catch about 6 balls for 54 yards and a touchdown, but he's on pace to catch 37 passes for 270 yards and a couple of touchdowns. So Taysom Hill getting involved in the passing game a lot more than I thought. Those catches, along with the excess catches by Kamara, I figured would be going to tight end Juwan Johnson. Now, Johnson missed, 4 games with an injury. So that has put a big damper on his numbers. But when he has played, he hasn't done anything. I thought he would finish the season with 50 catches for 650 yards and 7 touchdowns. He had 7 touchdowns last year. But if he remains healthy and only catches a couple of 3 passes every game, he's going to finish the year with 29 catches for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is a pretty big disappointment for me. I did not put down Morrow's numbers, but I figured he would finish the year with 22 catches for 220 yards, and he's projected to finish the year with 18 catches for 182 yards, 2 touchdowns. I figured he'd have 2 touchdowns, so I'm pretty spot on with Morrow. But the catches by Kamara and Hill seem to be going to them instead of to Johnson. And like I say, Olave's projected to catch a lot more than what I thought. And then we'll see if Thomas plays, how much he'll finish with. But so those are my honest-to-God predictions of offensive players' stats and where they are at. In some instances, I was pretty spot on, but in most instances, I was off when it comes to touchdowns, especially for Carr and for Thomas. I was expecting big things from Carr, Thomas, and Johnson. All right, so let's do the awards now, and we're going to start with biggest disappointment. And I got to say, my award for biggest disappointment goes to Trevor Penning. I expected him to start, to improve, to be a solid left tackle, if not a budding star left tackle. But instead, he's sitting on the bench. Now, most of these, I had 5 to choose from, and I picked my winner. But for biggest disappointment, I have a lot of players here. Cameron Jordan, Jawan Johnson, Jamal Williams. All of these guys are having disappointing seasons. Pete Werner, James Hurst, who's not on this list, Marcus May, and of course Derek Carr, who, if he's your biggest disappointment, it wouldn't surprise me. I figured he would be average, so I'm disappointed in the yardage and the touchdowns, but he's doing okay and protecting the ball, sort of, and completion percentage. And of course the specialists, Blake Grupe, Lou Hedley. There's also disappointments as far as the injury front goes. Isaiah Foskey is the biggest disappointment as a rookie, but this injury set him back. He looked like he was about to turn a corner and show something, and then Trey Turner, who we signed as a free agent and got hurt his first day of practice. He was supposed to be our solid backup guard / tackle here, and we could have used Trey Turner earlier in the season when we had some players out with injury. And Peyton Turner, he's not on this list either, but because of his injury and our lack of pass rush, that's kind of a disappointment. But definitely, in my opinion, Trevor Penning, biggest disappointment. And right after that, I would have to say Cameron Jordan, Jawan Johnson, Jamal Williams, and Derek Carr. So this could be the whole team. You could put the head coach here, the offensive coordinator. That's our biggest disappointment. So let's go to the biggest surprise. And the biggest surprise would also be most improved player, someone who's doing stuff that we didn't think they would do. And my biggest surprise is defensive end Carl Granderson. I always thought he was a pretty good player, but he played down to competition, up to competition. He's been a lot more consistent this year. He's having the best year out of anyone on the defensive line. I thought that would be Cam Jordan. So Carl Granderson, to me, is the biggest surprise. I've also mentioned cornerback Paulson Adebo, who is, a really surprising player to me. I figured he'd be a good starter. I figured Alontae Taylor would challenge him for that number 2 cornerback spot. And the surprise to me is that Adebo is shown he's definitely our number 2, and he plays like a number 1. He has lately. Jordan Howden, the rookie, our starting dime safety, and playing a lot, taking starters' places like Marcus May when he was out for 2 games. He's been a really big surprise, a nice surprise. Also, Isaac Yiadom. Every time he comes in the game and plays, he's very effective. Last week, Marshawn Lattimore got hurt in the second half, and our defense played better in that fourth quarter than they did the whole game. And Yiadom was the guy that took Lattimore's place. Granted, the Vikings were running the ball and trying to run the clock out, and they weren't taking the chances they were before. But, hey, every time the guy goes out there, he performs. I also mentioned Andres Pete. I figured he would be our guard, and could have been one of the biggest disappointments. Seemed to lose his job to Hurst, but he's found a place at left tackle for now. And yeah, even though he's not performing great, he's still performing better than I thought he would. It's a big surprise to me. All right, how about Rookie of the Year? Well, I really think this only comes down to 2 players, and it's the 2 starters. And that would be Jordan Howden and Bryan Bresee. I'm giving the edge to Jordan Howden. I think Bryan Bresee has been a nice addition. Our defensive line as a whole is just performing poorly right now. Bresee has like 5 passes defensed, which is very impressive. I think he's only got a sack and a half total. But and he's getting a lot of playing time. Bresee's on the field a lot, so it's a big surprise to me, and I'm not disappointed. But I'm not going to give him Rookie of the Year. For all the time he is on the field, we're just not seeing enough from this defensive line as a unit. And If he decides to step it up and start stacking some sacks and some pressures and stopping the run, that'll be great. All right, sorry. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give it to Jordan Howden. He doesn't have the big stats as far as interceptions go right now, but he's playing multiple roles in that dime safety. Sometimes he drops down. He's got the ability to play on the outside as a cornerback, actually, but I think he'll fit in good as a nickel too. Box safety, deep safety. He's been playing a lot of deep safety in that dime package. So overall, I think the rookie class is doing okay. Kendre Miller's biggest problem is staying healthy. He hasn't been very productive when he's on the field, but you can see there's some potential there. And Isaiah Foskey was turning a corner, but he's hurt. Don't know how long he's going to be out. We just signed Jason Pierre-Paul, so it makes me think that we're going to be without Foskey for the rest of the year. We won't know that for sure probably till next week. I also mentioned wide receiver A.T. Perry. Nick Saldiveri at guard has gotten some playing time. I think he played one game and maybe parts of another game since the season started. But A.T. Perry's been active in the last couple of games and got his first catch and his first touchdown in his past game. And, of course, the quarterback, Jake Haener, who was suspended for 6 games. He's not an option here. But there you go, Rookie of the Year. All right, and now there's 2 more categories. Defensive Player of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year. And I'm going for Defensive Player of the Year, defensive end Carl Granderson. He's got 5.5 sacks. That was his total from last year. He's got 7 games to go. He signed a big fat contract, and he's obviously our most active and productive defensive lineman so far this year. If Carl Granderson brings the heat, then this defense is rolling. The only one that was really even close to getting Defensive Player of the Year besides Granderson was Demario Davis and Paulson Adebo. Davis is leading the team in tackles, and he's got a lot more tackles than I thought he would because I figured Pete Werner would have a few more. And I kind of lean more towards Paulson Adebo. He's got a lot of big plays. He's close to the league tops as far as passes defensed. He's grading out as one of the best cornerbacks in the league this year. Paulson Adebo would be my choice if it weren't for Granderson and then Davis after that. I also got to give kudos to Marshawn Lattimore. He won't rack up the stats, but when his presence is felt when he's on the field. We'll see how long he's going to be out with the injury he's dealing with, and we're not going to figure that out till next week. But I think we're pretty good with Paulson Adebo and Isaac Yiadom at cornerback. Should Lattimore miss the rest of the season? And it's a possibility. There's also a chance that Alontae Taylor goes on the outside and we put Ugo Amadi as our nickel. So, you're thinning yourself out when you do that. Yiadom's not a bad outside cornerback. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised that teams that are cornerback deficient out there aren't trying to wheel and deal to get Isaac Yiadom from us. Okay, so Isaac Yiadom, 5-year veteran, free agent. We sign him. He's got plenty of tape, but I think what he's done with the Saints has been pretty impressive. So I would expect a lot of cornerback deficient teams to want to make a move for him. I mean, I would. I think Yiadom's better than a lot of the cornerbacks that are out there. We're lucky to have him. But definitely our Defensive Player of the Year, Carl Granderson, Paulson Adebo, Demario I don't think there's any controversy here. Quarterback, Taysom Hill, who's a great tight end, great wide receiver, great special teamer, great running back, great quarterback. He does everything well. He's the spark that this team needs. And our offense sputters when Taysom Hill is not heavily involved. And the only one that comes close to getting the Offensive Player of the Year from Taysom Hill, to me, is Alvin Kamara. And he missed 3 games. But he's still, in my opinion, the only one close to Taysom Hill for this Offensive Player of the Year award. I'm also going to give kudos to Michael Thomas, who's been the most consistent wide receiver. And then Chris Olave, who's looking really good, and Rashid Shaheed, who, you know, there are some things he does still, and you can tell he's a young player. But he's a big play waiting to happen, and he is a big surprise. And we are lucky as a team to have him. Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave. That's your Offensive Players of the Year. All right, that's it. That's my bye-week mid-season video. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10 for more videos like this. I will be doing a preview of the upcoming Week 12 game, the biggest rivalry in our existence. Screw the Vikings. Who cares about them? Win a Super Bowl, why don't you? Atlanta versus Saints. Dirty Birds versus the Hoodats. And that video will probably come out early next week. Thursdays is usually the day I drop videos, and it's Thanksgiving. But there is a chance the video will come out before then. If not, no later than Friday. And until then, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?